My name is Samantha Cole, and I'm 35 years old. I live in a quiet neighborhood just outside Madison, Wisconsin. Most people around here know me as the woman who's always smiling, who greets everyone by name at the grocery store, and who volunteers at the food bank every other weekend. But very few people know that behind my calm smile, I hold a story that shook our entire state, a story that began with kindness and ended with blue lights flashing in my face. Yes, this is the story of the day the cops illegally arrested their own state representative, and how that single mistake cost them their careers. But let me tell you, it didn't happen overnight. It all started on a rainy Wednesday afternoon, the kind that makes the sky look tired and the streets shimmer like glass. I had just left a meeting at the state capitol, wearing my gray coat and holding my briefcase, which still smelled faintly of coffee from the cafe downstairs. I was tired but proud. I just finished a community proposal to support struggling families in rural Wisconsin. You see, I wasn't just any woman trying to make ends meet. I was Representative Samantha Cole, a state official elected 2 years ago because people believed in my heart more than my promises. I've always believed kindness changes everything. My grandmother used to say, "People may forget what you say, but they never forget how you made them feel." That quote guided every decision I made in office. I helped farmers keep their land, helped a single mother avoid eviction, and once spent my entire weekend helping a homeless veteran find a place to stay. But that day, kindness almost got me killed. As I walked toward my car parked near East Washington Avenue, I noticed two police cruisers pulled over by the curb. Their lights weren't on, but something about their stillness made my stomach tighten. I tried to ignore it. I had files to read, phone calls to return, and a promise to keep to a group of teachers I'd be meeting the next morning. But before I could reach my car, I heard a shout. "Hey, you, stop right there." I froze. The voice was sharp, cutting through the drizzle like glass. I turned slowly, clutching my briefcase tighter. Two officers, both tall, both tense, were walking toward me. One had his hand on his holster. The other had a scowl that said he'd already decided I was guilty of something. "Can I help you, officer?" I asked, keeping my voice calm. "Don't move," the taller one barked. "You match the description of a suspect involved in a bank fraud case. We need to check your ID." My heart skipped. "I think there's some mistake," I said softly. "I'm Representative Samantha Cole. I just came from the Capitol." The other officer scoffed. "Sure you are. And I'm the governor." I tried to show them my ID, but before I could even open my purse, the taller one grabbed my wrist. Hard. "Ma'am, stop resisting." "I'm not resisting," I protested. "You're making a mistake. Look, my ID's right here." Before I could finish, he twisted my arm behind my back. Pain shot through my shoulder. The rain was now coming down harder, drenching my hair and soaking my papers. Pedestrians stopped, whispering. Someone pulled out a phone to record. And that's when I heard the words that froze my blood. "You're under arrest for obstruction and fraud." I gasped. "What? No." "Please check my badge, my office will." The officer shoved me against the hood of his car. My cheek pressed cold against the metal. The other officer snapped handcuffs around my wrists, tight enough to leave marks. I could hear the whispers growing louder. "Isn't it the state rep?" someone murmured. "Wait, are they actually arresting her?" But the officers didn't care. They shoved me into the back of the cruiser, like I was some common criminal. My briefcase lay in the gutter, papers spilling into puddles. I sat there, rain dripping from my hair, staring at my reflection in the glass divider. My chest was tight. My throat burned. I wanted to scream, but I couldn't. All I could think was, how did kindness lead to this? They drove me away, sirens wailing now. The whole world outside the window blurred into gray streaks. I didn't know where they were taking me. I didn't know why they wouldn't listen. All I knew was that something was terribly wrong, and the longer I stayed silent, the worse it would get. But the part that nobody saw, the part that changed everything, was what happened inside that station. The way they treated me, the words they said, and the moment I finally shouted my truth. That was the moment everything snapped. And by the time morning came, the entire police department would be under investigation. Every officer involved would be fired because they hadn't just arrested a woman. They had illegally arrested their own state representative. But that's not where the story ends. In fact, that's just where it begins. Before all this happened, I was just a woman trying to make a difference. Let me take you back to the start of everything. It was 6 months earlier, a warm spring morning in Madison. The air smelled like new flowers and freshly brewed coffee. I remember waking up early, jogging through the park, and waving to the same people I saw every morning. Mr. Jenkins with his golden retriever, Miss Elena watering her roses, and the group of teenagers skateboarding near the fountain. "Good morning, Representative Cole," they'd call out. I'd smile and wave. "Morning, everyone. Stay safe, okay?" Life felt peaceful then. I'd just finished passing a new housing assistance bill. My days were busy, but my heart was full. I spent my evenings with my neighbors' kids, reading to them while their mom worked night shifts. I often told them, when you have power, use it to help others. That's what real leadership means. But not everyone liked me. Some people thought I cared too much, that I interfered in things that didn't concern me, that my empathy made me weak. Especially a few officers in the Madison Police Department who thought my push for accountability and body camera laws made their jobs harder. One officer, in particular, Sergeant Blake, never hid his dislike for me. We'd clashed during a town hall meeting where I called for more transparency in police reports. He'd stood up, red-faced, and said, "You politicians sit in offices while we risk our lives on the streets." I didn't argue. I just said, "And that's exactly why we owe it to you and the people to make sure justice is fair for everyone." He didn't forget that. Neither did I. And 6 months later, it would be his hands gripping my wrist in the rain. But before we get there, I want you to know who I really am. I was raised in a small town in northern Wisconsin. My mom was a schoolteacher. My dad drove trucks for a living. We didn't have much, but we had love. My parents always taught me that no one is too small to make a difference. When I was 12, I helped organize a food drive for families who lost their homes in a flood. That was the first time I saw how kindness could ripple through a community. I carried that lesson into adulthood. By the time I was 30, I had built a small nonprofit that helped low-income families get access to healthcare. People started recognizing my name, calling me the Heart of Madison. When I finally ran for office, I didn't have big sponsors or flashy ads, just stories. Real people stories. So when I won, it wasn't just my victory. It was theirs. But power changes how people see you. Suddenly, some smiled only when cameras were around. Some whispered behind my back. And others, like Sergeant Blake, waited for me to make one wrong move. I didn't know it then, but that wrong move wasn't going to come from me. It was going to come from them. And when it did, it would explode like a storm no one saw coming. Now, before we go deeper, tell me, where are you watching from tonight? Are you in Canada? The United States? Maybe somewhere else? Because this story, though it happened to me, could happen anywhere, to anyone who believes in doing good in a world that sometimes punishes kindness. But hold on to your seats, because what happened next, even I didn't see it coming. It started with a phone call, one that would change everything. My assistant, Lauren, called me one evening, her voice trembling. "Sam, something strange is going on," she said. "You might want to sit down." And that's where it all began, the chain of events that led to that cold, rainy arrest. When I answered that trembling phone call from my assistant, Lauren, I had no idea the storm I was walking into. Her voice was shaking like she'd seen a ghost. "Sam," she said, breathing fast, "you need to see this for yourself. Someone filed a complaint under your name." My heart skipped. "What kind of complaint?" "Fraud," she whispered. "Bank fraud. But the weirdest part, it's not against you. It's from you. Someone forged your signature." For a few seconds, I didn't say a word. I could hear the hum of the street outside my apartment, the faint echo of children playing, and my own pulse pounding in my ears. "What bank?" I finally asked. "First Capital Trust," she replied. "It's all over their internal network, Sam. The system shows a transfer of state grant money, $500,000, into a private account under your name. But it's fake. The routing number doesn't match. I stood up slowly, gripping the back of my chair.
Who did this?
That's what I'm trying to find out, Lauren said, voice trembling. But someone's trying to destroy your reputation. You need to be careful. That night, I barely slept. My thoughts were racing. Who could have done it? I'd made enemies, sure, but this was beyond politics. This was criminal. By morning, I was at my office downtown, sitting across from Attorney General Mason, a sharp man in his 50s with tired eyes and a no-nonsense tone. Representative Cole, he said, adjusting his glasses, this looks serious. But if what you're saying is true, someone's framing you. Let me run this through our cyber unit. I nodded.
Please.
My name, my integrity, everything I've worked for, is on the line. He gave me a faint smile. You've made waves, Sam. Helped a lot of people. Sometimes, that scares the wrong kind of folks. I sighed, staring out the window at the Capitol dome glowing in the distance. Kindness shouldn't scare people. He leaned back. It does when it threatens power. Over the next few weeks, things got strange. People who used to greet me with smiles suddenly avoided eye contact. My emails went unanswered. A few journalists started calling my office, asking questions that made my stomach twist. Representative Cole, did you authorize the $500,000 grant transfer? Are you aware of any misuse of public funds? Lauren tried to manage the damage. She answered calls, sent statements, reminded everyone of my record. But rumors travel faster than truth. Then, one evening, as I was heading home from a late committee session, I noticed something unusual. A black, unmarked car parked across from my apartment building.
2 men inside.
No headlights, just silhouettes. I watched them through my rearview mirror for a few minutes. My instincts screamed that something wasn't right. I parked a few blocks away and walked quietly back to my building. When I reached my floor, my neighbor, Mrs. Rivers, an elderly woman with soft eyes, was standing at her door. "Evening, dear," she said. "There were 2 men asking for you earlier. Said they were police officers." I froze. "Police?" She nodded. "They didn't show badges. Just said you were needed for questioning. I told them you weren't home." I forced a smile. "Thank you, Mrs. Rivers. That was smart." But inside, I was panicking. If they were real officers, why hadn't I received an official notice? And if they weren't, who were they? I double-locked my door that night. I even pushed a chair against it, something I hadn't done since I was a child. I sat on my couch, scrolling through my phone, searching for answers. And that's when I found it, a video on social media, barely 10 seconds long. It showed me walking into the Capitol 2 days earlier. The caption read, "Wisconsin State Rep under investigation for embezzlement." My chest went cold. There were hundreds of comments, some angry, some mocking, some just confused. How could she do this? I thought she cared about people. Politicians, always fake smiles. I dropped my phone, shaking. I had spent years fighting for honesty, for justice, and now the world was being made to believe I was a criminal. But I wasn't going to let lies win. The next morning, I called for a press briefing. The room was packed. Journalists, cameras, flashing lights. It all felt suffocating. I stepped to the podium and spoke firmly, though my hands trembled. "Good morning, everyone. You've heard rumors, claims that I misused state funds. Let me be clear. Those claims are false. Someone is using my name and signature to spread lies. And I won't rest until the truth comes out." Reporters shouted questions. I answered calmly, though my heart pounded. But as I spoke, I noticed someone in the crowd, a man standing at the back, wearing a dark jacket, arms crossed, watching me closely. It was Sergeant Blake, the same officer who'd argued with me months ago about police accountability. His eyes were cold, his expression unreadable. When the conference ended, I tried to approach him, but he turned and left before I could say a word. That night, I received an anonymous email. No subject. Just one line. "Stop asking questions or we'll stop you." Days passed and the pressure only grew. I started receiving letters with no return address, messages on my car windshield, even a strange knock on my door at midnight that disappeared when I looked through the peephole. Lauren begged me to report it. "Sam, this is getting dangerous," she said. "Please talk to the Capitol Police." I did. But the moment I mentioned the threats, the officer at the desk gave me a tight smile and said, "We'll look into it." Nothing happened. It was as if no one wanted to touch my case. Then, a week later, the story took a darker turn. It was a Thursday evening. I'd just left a town meeting in a small community outside Madison. I'd spent the night talking to residents about affordable housing, sharing laughter and warm words. It reminded me why I loved what I did. The rain had started again as I walked to my car. The parking lot was nearly empty. I heard footsteps behind me, slow, deliberate. I turned, but no one was there. I reached for my keys. Then suddenly, bright lights flashed in my face. Freeze. My body stiffened. 2 police cruisers pulled up from nowhere. I recognized one of the voices instantly. "Representative Cole," Sergeant Blake said, stepping into the rain with his flashlight raised. "You're under arrest for fraud and obstruction." My mouth went dry.
What?
"You know this isn't true. You know me." But he didn't listen. Another officer, one I didn't recognize, grabbed my arm. "You have the right to remain silent." I struggled. "This is insane. You can't do this. I'm a sitting state representative." Before I could finish, Blake shoved me against the car. "You think that makes you untouchable? The law applies to everyone." Pain shot through my shoulder. I could hear my own voice breaking. "Please listen to me. Check my ID. My office can—" But they didn't. They cuffed me, shoved me into the back seat, and slammed the door. As the cruiser pulled away, I saw Lauren standing near the meeting hall, her mouth open in shock. She was already reaching for her phone. And as the sirens blared into the night, one thought echoed in my mind. They don't know what they've done. Because in just a few hours, the entire state would know. The news would break. The cameras would roll. And those very officers who arrested me would be the ones escorted out of their own station in handcuffs. The sirens blared through the wet night like angry screams echoing through my bones. My wrists ached against the handcuffs, cold metal biting into my skin. The rain hadn't stopped. It poured harder, like the sky itself was furious at what was happening. I tried to steady my breathing as the police cruiser sped through the streets of Madison. Streetlights flickered past, smearing into yellow streaks against the window. I caught my reflection in the glass, my face pale, hair soaked, eyes filled with disbelief. I whispered to myself, "Stay calm, Sam. Just stay calm." But how do you stay calm when you've just been illegally arrested by your own police department? The driver said nothing. Sergeant Blake sat in the passenger seat, his arms crossed, staring straight ahead. I could see the vein in his neck throbbing, like he was forcing himself to stay angry. Finally, I spoke. "Blake, you know this isn't right. You know who I am. Why are you doing this?" He turned slightly, his voice sharp. "You politicians think you're above the law. Maybe spending a night in a cell will remind you otherwise." I leaned forward, my voice trembling with frustration. "You're destroying your career for something you don't even understand." He didn't answer. He just said to the driver, "Take her straight to precinct." That was the longest 20 minutes of my life. When we finally pulled into the Madison Police Headquarters, I could see officers milling around, talking, laughing, unaware of what was happening. The moment they saw me being led and handcuffed, the laughter stopped. You could feel the silence crash like thunder. Some of them whispered my name. "Wait, that's Representative Cole. What is she doing here?" Blake ignored them. He pushed me forward. "Booking room," he ordered. Inside, the harsh fluorescent lights buzzed above. The air smelled like bleach and metal. My shoes squeaked on the floor as they led me to a desk where a young officer looked up, startled. "Sir," he said to Blake, lowering his voice, "are you sure about this?" "She's just your job," Blake snapped. The young officer hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, sir." He reached for the camera. "Face forward, please." I felt something inside me crack as the flash went off. A mugshot. A state representative, handcuffed, drenched, and terrified. When they took my fingerprints, my hands were shaking so badly that the machine kept beeping. I could barely stand straight. They placed me in a small holding cell, gray walls, no windows, one bench. The door clanged shut behind me. That sound, clang, it echoed through me like a verdict. I sat there for what felt like hours, trying to make sense of everything. How could this happen? How could they arrest a state representative without even verifying anything? And then, slowly, a deeper fear crept in. What if this wasn't a mistake? What if someone had planned this? Meanwhile, outside the station, things were already spiraling. Lauren, my assistant, had recorded the entire arrest. She uploaded the video to social media within minutes, captioned, "State Rep Samantha Cole arrested without warrant or evidence. This is wrong." It spread like wildfire. By midnight, my phone, confiscated by the police, had over 1,000 missed calls. News stations were calling my office. Reporters were outside the police precinct demanding answers. And at the Capitol, Attorney General Mason was already on the move. Back in my cell, I sat in silence, replaying every decision I'd made in the past few months. Who had reason to destroy me? Who could gain from my downfall? The fraud accusations, the fake transfers, the threats, it all pointed to one thing. Someone wanted me silenced. The door clanged open again. Blake entered, holding a clipboard. He looked smug. "You'll be staying overnight," he said. "Judge will see you in the morning." I looked up, exhausted but defiant. "Do you even realize what you've done?"
He smirked.
"I've done my job." I stood, meeting his eyes. "No, Blake. You've just arrested a sitting state representative without a warrant, without probable cause, and without notifying the Attorney General. You've broken the law." For a moment, something flickered in his expression, hesitation, maybe fear, but he quickly masked it with arrogance. "We'll see about that," he muttered, then turned to leave. The door slammed shut again. The hours dragged on. I don't know when I finally dozed off, but I was jolted awake by the sound of yelling outside my cell. Voices. Angry, loud, chaotic. Then, heavy footsteps. The cell door burst open, and this time, it wasn't Blake. It was Chief Daniels, the police chief himself, flanked by two stern-looking men in suits. One of them I recognized instantly, Attorney General Mason. He looked furious. "Representative Cole," he said firmly, "are you all right?" I nodded slowly, confused. "Yes, what's going on?" He turned to the officers behind him. "Release her.
Now."
Blake appeared behind the group, pale as chalk. "Sir, with all due respect." "Not another word," Mason roared. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" The chief motioned for the keys. The door opened. The handcuffs came off. My wrists were red and bruised, but I didn't care. I was free. Mason turned toward Blake, his voice low but deadly calm. "You and every officer involved in this arrest are suspended, effective immediately. Internal Affairs will handle the rest." The other officers in the room froze. Some looked shocked. Others looked ashamed. Blake's voice cracked. "Sir, she matched the suspect's description." Mason cut him off. "She's a state representative. You arrested her without verifying her identity, without a warrant, and without notifying command. You violated multiple protocols. You're finished." Blake's face went white. He stammered, "Sir, But Mason turned to me instead. "Representative Cole, I deeply apologize. You've been treated unfairly. We're going to get to the bottom of this." I swallowed hard. "I just want the truth to come out." He nodded. "It will." And then, as he escorted me out of the station, the flash of cameras outside hit like lightning. Reporters shouting questions. Lights everywhere. I stepped out into the cold air, trembling, my heart pounding, but there was something else beneath the fear.
Fire.
A quiet, burning fire in my chest. They had tried to humiliate me. They had tried to silence me. But they had no idea who they were dealing with. That night, while I sat in the Attorney General's car on the way to his office, Mason's phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Calls from the governor, the media, even the Federal Oversight Committee. The story had gone national. Every major outlet's running it, he said grimly. This could shake the entire department. I looked out the window, rain still streaking down the glass. Good, I said softly. It's time for the truth. But before the night ended, we received one more call. One that changed everything. Mason put it on speaker. It was Lauren. Her voice was frantic. Sam, you need to hear this. I found the real documents, the digital trail.
It's not just the police involved.
Someone inside the Capitol was helping them. Mason's eyes widened. What did you say? Lauren hesitated, then whispered. It's someone in your circle, Sam. Someone close. The car went dead silent. I felt my stomach twist as Mason met my eyes. Whoever set this up, they weren't just after your name. They were after your seat. And right then I realized this wasn't over. It had only just begun. The air in the car turned heavy, thick enough that I could feel it pressing against my chest. The windshield wipers swayed back and forth, smearing the rain as though the night itself didn't want us to see what was coming. Lauren's voice trembled through the speaker. Sam, I traced the fake grant documents. The IP address, it came from an office inside the Capitol. Attorney General Mason leaned forward. Which department? She hesitated. It's from your own floor, Sam. The Legislative Office Wing. My stomach dropped. That's impossible. Only authorized staff and representatives have access to that network. I know, Lauren said quietly. That's why this is bad. The person who created those fake files used a government login. It's someone who knows your schedule, your habits, and your password was changed without your permission last month. I froze. My password? Wait, how? I checked the log. It was done manually, not by the IT department. Someone went into your account and replaced it using a secondary authorization code. I didn't even know those existed. Mason's expression hardened. That means inside help. Someone high enough to override system security. I swallowed, my heart hammering. You mean someone I trusted? Silence filled the car. I closed my eyes and thought back over the past few months. Meetings, committees, friendly handshakes, polite smiles. Everyone had seemed normal. Everyone had seemed loyal. But who had access to my account? Only a handful of people, Lauren, of course, but she'd never betray me. Then there was Deputy Chief of Staff Daniel Harris, a soft-spoken man in his 40s with a calm voice and a perfect memory for details. He joined my team last year, recommended by a senior senator. He handled financial documents, budgets, and communication with other departments. A sudden chill crawled up my spine. Lauren, I said, my voice tight, check Daniel Harris's access history. There was a pause. I could hear her typing rapidly on the other end, the sound of computer keys clattering like rainfall. Then silence. Lauren? Mason asked. Her voice came back shaky. Sam, his login was used to send the grant transfer form to First Capital Trust. 2 weeks ago. Mason's hand slammed the dashboard. That's it. That's the link. I sat back, numb. Daniel, the man who brought me coffee every morning, who stayed late helping me review bills, who once said, "You're the most honest representative I've ever worked with." I trusted him. Get me his address, Mason said. We'll handle this legally. Lauren hesitated again. Sir, there's something else. What? He's gone. What do you mean gone? I asked. His apartment's empty. No furniture, no clothes, no forwarding address. He cleared out last night. The car went completely silent. Mason muttered under his breath. He knew this was coming. I leaned my head back, the seat suddenly cold against my skin. So that's it. He set me up, framed me, and ran. But Mason shook his head. No, Representative. That's not it. This goes deeper. A single staffer doesn't have the power to pull something like this off, not without help from someone higher. I turned to him. You think the police were working with him? He nodded slowly. Blake didn't just happen to arrest you. Someone wanted that seen public. They wanted you humiliated. Why? I whispered. Why go that far? Because your bills, Mason said, were about accountability. You were exposing corrupt state contracts, the same ones certain officers and contractors profit from. If your reputation is ruined, your reforms die with you. I looked out the window, rain still pouring, and for the first time that night, anger burned through my fear. Then we'll make sure they regret ever underestimating me. The next morning, the news exploded across the nation. Illegal arrest of state rep sparks mass firings. Wisconsin police under fire after wrongful detention. Who is behind the frame-up of Samantha Cole? The story led every network. Videos of my arrest had gone viral, with millions of views. Protesters stood outside Madison City Hall holding signs that read "Justice for Cole" and "Protect honest leaders." The police department scrambled to contain the damage. Chief Daniels issued a public apology, but it wasn't enough. The governor himself demanded accountability. By noon, 5 officers, including Sergeant Blake, were suspended without pay pending investigation. When I saw the footage of them leaving the station, badges removed, faces pale, it didn't bring me joy. It just left me with questions.
Who told them to target me?
Who gave that order? Because I knew Blake wasn't smart enough or brave enough to do this alone. At my office, the phones wouldn't stop ringing. Supporters, journalists, and even strangers called, offering sympathy. But behind the noise, I felt something watching me. Every time I stepped outside, I noticed a black SUV parked a little too close. When I left meetings, I caught glimpses of a man in a dark hat turning away just as I looked up. Someone was still following me. Lauren noticed too. "Sam, you need security," she urged. "They're not done with you." I nodded, though inside, I hated the idea of living in fear. "I'll be careful, but I won't stop working. Because if I stopped, they'd win." That night, I went home early, made tea, and sat on my couch with the files Lauren had recovered. The documents were full of fake transactions, coded numbers, and signatures that looked almost, but not exactly, like mine. Whoever had done this knew what they were doing. And buried among the data, there was a name I hadn't seen before. Project Haven. It appeared repeatedly in the documents, tagged beside Daniel Harris's digital signature. I circled it. Project Haven. I whispered to myself. What was it? A company? A code name? The deeper I read, the stranger it got. The so-called fraudulent transfers were linked to shell companies, businesses that didn't exist, except on paper. Each one was tied to government funding for community housing, the very bill I had championed. Then, at the bottom of the file, there was a single line that made my blood run cold. Authorized by DH, confirmed by CAP. Office/BW. BW? I frowned. Blake's initials were BW Blake, Brian William Blake. It couldn't be a coincidence. I dropped the file on the table and grabbed my phone. "Lauren, I found something. There's a link between Daniel and Blake, something called Project Haven." Her voice came out barely above a whisper. "Sam, don't say that name too loudly."
What? Why?
"Because I think I just found out what it means," she said. Project Haven isn't a company, it's a cover operation. Hidden under a federal housing grant. Millions of dollars have been disappearing for years. My pulse quickened. And the money? Going into private accounts, she said. Owned by police officers, state contractors, and one sitting senator. I froze. Which senator? Her voice cracked. Senator Roger Hale. I felt my entire body go cold. Hale was the one who'd endorsed me, who'd publicly supported my campaign, who once said, "Samantha Cole is the future of the state." It all started to make sense now. The world turned sideways. Metal shrieked as my car skidded across the slick asphalt, spinning once, twice, before slamming into a row of newspaper stands. My head snapped forward. The seatbelt locked hard across my chest. The only thing I could hear was the ringing in my ears and my own heartbeat hammering like a war drum. Through the cracked windshield, I saw the black SUV roll to a stop 30 yards behind me. Its headlights glowed like predator eyes in the rain. I fumbled with my seatbelt and forced the door open. Pain shot up my arm where it had struck the steering wheel. My phone had flown onto the passenger side floor. I snatched it up, hit speed dial. "Lauren," I gasped when she answered. They hit me. I'm on 5th and Cedar. Call Mason now. Her voice cracked with panic. Stay on the line. I'm sending your location. The SUV door opened. 2 men stepped out. One held something metallic that gleamed under the streetlight. My chest tightened. This wasn't intimidation anymore. This was elimination. I staggered out of the car and ran toward the alley between 2 boarded-up buildings. My shoes splashed through puddles. Behind me, boots pounded the pavement. Stop, one of them shouted. You're making it worse for yourself. Worse? I thought. How much worse could it get? I ducked around a dumpster, pressing my back to the wall, trying to steady my breathing. Through a sliver of space, I saw the taller man raise a hand, signaling the other to spread out. Footsteps crunched closer. Then, headlights swept across the street. Another car screeched to a halt. Attorney General Mason jumped out, a Glock in his hand. Police. Drop it, he bellowed. The 2 men froze. One bolted for the SUV. The other raised his weapon. Mason fired a warning shot that ricocheted off the pavement. I said drop it. Sirens wailed in the distance. Red and blue lights flickered faintly at the far end of the block. The second man cursed and threw his weapon down. The first dove into the SUV, slammed the door, and peeled off with a screech of tires. Mason lunged forward but couldn't stop it as it vanished into the night. The man who stayed was tackled to the ground by 2 plainclothes agents who emerged from the car with Mason. They cuffed him in seconds. I stumbled out from the alley, my knees trembling. Mason grabbed my shoulder. You all right? I think so, I breathed. Who are they? He looked at the handcuffed man, then at me. We're about to find out. The man smirked even as blood dripped from a cut on his cheek. You think you're untouchable? He sneered at me. Project Haven is bigger than you can imagine. I stepped closer, my voice low and shaking. Who sent you? He smiled, teeth glinting. You already know. Mason's jaw clenched. Get him out of here, he told his agents. Quiet location, no leaks. As they dragged the man into a waiting car, I turned to Mason. It's Hale, isn't it? He didn't answer immediately. Finally, he said, we can't accuse a sitting senator without proof. I have proof, I said. My voice was steadier now. The files. The authorizations. His name is all over Project Haven. Mason shook his head. Not enough. Those documents will be shredded in court as circumstantial unless we get direct evidence, a recording, a bank transfer, a witness. I stared at him. Then we get one. He met my eyes. Sam, this isn't politics anymore. Hale's playing for keeps. People have died over this project. If we go after him, we need to be absolutely sure. I'm sure, I said. I won't stop until everyone who did this is exposed. I don't care if it's a senator, a police chief, or anyone else. Mason studied me for a long moment, then nodded. Then we move fast. Before they move on you again. 2 days later, headlines erupted again. Arrest made in attempted hit-and-run of state rep. Project Haven. New documents reveal $27 million in missing funds. The public was turning. Protesters now filled the Capitol steps, chanting Hale's name along with mine. News anchors called it the biggest state scandal in decades. But behind the scenes, I knew we were only scratching the surface. Lauren had uncovered another breadcrumb, an encrypted drive hidden inside Daniel Harris's desk drawer. She cracked it the night before. Inside were audio recordings of conversations between Harris and a senior official about how to neutralize me before the next election. The voice on the tape was clear.
Smooth.
Confident. It was Senator Hale. When Mason heard it, he exhaled slowly. That's it, he said. This is what we needed. But even as he said it, a chill crawled up my neck. Because on the last recording, Harris's voice sounded panicked. They're moving tonight, he said. She knows too much. If this goes wrong, I'm dead. And then another voice, Hale's, responded. Relax. We'll clean everything up. She won't see tomorrow. The timestamp on the file? The night I was hit by the SUV. I looked at Mason. He's not going to stop. He's going to kill Harris, too. We'll put Harris in protective custody, Mason said. I shook my head. If he's still alive. Because deep down, I knew Daniel Harris wouldn't get a chance to testify. And I knew Hale's next move would be his boldest yet. By the time dawn rolled over the horizon, the city felt heavy. Even the sunlight that pushed through the clouds seemed to carry tension with it, like the calm before a hurricane. I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw headlights, spinning wheels, and the smug grin of Senator Hale as his voice echoed from that recording. She won't see tomorrow. But I was still here. And that, in itself, meant I wasn't done fighting. Mason's office was sealed tight with extra security when I arrived that morning. Federal agents lined the corridor, their badges visible and their eyes sharp. Inside, Mason stood over a long oak table littered with files, printouts, and coffee cups that had gone cold hours ago. Lauren sat beside him, typing furiously on her laptop. "Morning," Mason said without looking up. "You ready to go public?" I hesitated. Public with what? Exactly?
He slid a folder toward me.
Everything. The audio files. The fake charges. The arrest. Even the missing funds. We can't play it quiet anymore. It's time to make noise. I opened the folder. My face stared back at me from the press briefing notes. The words, "State Representative Samantha Carter breaks silence," were typed in bold. "I want him exposed," I said. "But we do this by the book. If we move too fast, Hale will claim it's political revenge. He'll twist it like he always does." Lauren looked up. "What if we release the recordings through a trusted journalist? Someone who's not afraid of him." "Like who?" Mason asked. "Marissa Quinn," she said. "Channel 7. She's fearless and doesn't bend to power. If we leak to her first, she can control the narrative before Hale's people spin it." Mason nodded slowly. "Risky, but it might work." That's when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. "Don't," Mason warned. But something inside told me to answer. I stepped out of the room, pressing the phone to my ear. "Representative Carter," a calm voice said. "This is Special Agent Cole, Internal Affairs." I frowned. "Internal Affairs?" "Yes, ma'am. We've received new information about your arrest. We believe 2 of the officers who handled your case have fled the state. We're tracing their accounts. But there's something else." My stomach tightened. "What?" "Before they disappeared, they accessed your security footage, the night you were taken. They deleted sections of it." "Deleted?"
Yes.
"And they used a terminal linked to the Capitol Network." I froze. "The Capitol Network? You mean?" "Yes, ma'am. The system used by your own staff." My breath hitched. That's not possible. No one in my team would. But then a thought sliced through my chest like a knife. Lauren.
No.
She couldn't, could she? She had been the one to find the audio files. She had access to my home network. She had even been the one to suggest leaking through Marissa Quinn, something that would give her control of what went public first. I forced my voice steady. "Thank you, Agent Cole. Keep me updated." When I returned to the office, both Mason and Lauren looked up from the table. "You okay?" Lauren asked. "Yeah," I said slowly. "Just a call from Internal Affairs." Mason didn't catch the tremor in my voice. "We're all set for the briefing. If you're in, we go live in 1 hour." I nodded, but inside I was spinning. Could Lauren have betrayed me? I studied her. The way she tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, how her fingers tapped the table nervously, how she avoided eye contact. She'd been my closest ally since the started. My confidant. My friend. And yet the missing footage pointed to someone inside. Someone close. "Lauren," I said softly. "You've been amazing through all this. I couldn't have done it without you." She smiled faintly. "You don't have to thank me, Sam. We're in this together." I forced a nod.
Yeah.
Together. But my mind whispered, or maybe not. When we walked into the press hall, every camera in the state seemed to be waiting. Reporters shouted questions even before I reached the podium. Mason stood at my right, Lauren at my left. I took a deep breath and spoke clearly into the microphone. 2 weeks ago, I was arrested on charges that were false. I was treated like a criminal, by the very people sworn to uphold justice. But this is bigger than me. This is about truth and the kind of country we want to live in. The crowd hushed. I have proof, I continued, holding up a flash drive. Proof of corruption, blackmail, and a project designed to exploit the very citizens we swore to protect. And I will not be silenced. Reporters erupted with questions. Mason leaned forward to whisper, "You're doing good." I nodded slightly, but then I saw it. A tall man in a gray suit moving along the back of the room, speaking urgently into a headset. He wasn't part of my team. Mason noticed him too, narrowing his eyes. Suddenly, the man raised his hand, and another figure appeared near the exit, blocking it. Lauren stepped closer to me. "Sam, we have to end this now."
What?
"Why?" I asked, confused. She didn't answer. Instead, she grabbed my arm tightly, too tightly. And then, from her sleeve, I saw the glint of something small and silver, an earpiece. My heart dropped. Mason shouted, "Security," but before he could move, Lauren pulled a badge from her pocket, not a government one, but a private security insignia marked Haven Protection Division. Everything froze. Cameras flashed. Reporters gasped. Lauren's voice turned cold. "You should have stayed quiet, Sam." Then the man at the back shouted, "Now!" 3 armed men burst through the side door. Screams filled the hall. Mason drew his weapon. I ducked behind the podium as the first shot cracked through the air. The press conference turned into chaos. Journalists scattering, cameras falling, guards rushing in. Mason fired back, glass shattered, and the lights flickered out. Lauren vanished in the confusion. When the emergency lights blinked on again, she was gone, and so were the recordings. Hours later, I sat in the back of a black SUV, my hands trembling around a cup of untouched coffee. Mason sat across from me, his jaw tight. "She was working for Hale the whole time," he said quietly. "Planted in your office to monitor you. Every move you made, every file you touched, they knew." I stared out the window, numb. I trusted her. "I know," Mason said. "But it's not over. The recordings are backed up in our secure drive. Hale thinks he's safe again, but we're not done." I turned toward him slowly. "Then we bring him down." Mason nodded. "But we do it smart this time. No leaks. No noise. Just proof." I took a shaky breath. "And when we get that proof?" He met my eyes. "Then we burn every one of them down the right way." But deep inside, a cold realization sank in. Lauren knew everything. My plans, my routes, my weaknesses. And if Hale was smart, which he was, he'd use her for something far worse than spying. Something that would make my arrest look like child's play. Because people like him didn't just want silence. They wanted erasure. And I had a feeling that whatever came next was going to be the storm we'd been trying to outrun all along. Rain fell like broken glass. Each drop hit the window of the safe house with a sharp, relentless rhythm. I stood there, watching the blurred city lights through the water, clutching a photo of my old team, me, Mason, Lauren, and the others, smiling, before the betrayal. It almost didn't feel real. Lauren, my friend, my shadow, my trusted second-in-command, the woman who once cried with me over late-night coffee, had turned out to be Hale's planted spy. Now, she had vanished with the recordings that could destroy everything. Mason paced the room behind me, his phone pressed to his ear.
No.
"We can't move her to another location yet. The roads are still hot. Tell the agents to hold position. We don't know who else Hale has in his pocket." He hung up, sighing. "The press thinks you're missing. Hale's team is spinning it as emotional exhaustion. He's telling reporters you had a breakdown." I turned around slowly. "A breakdown?" He nodded grimly. "He wants the public to doubt your sanity before you even open your mouth again." A humorless laugh escaped me. Typical. Discredit the woman before she speaks. Mason studied me. "He underestimates you." "Everyone underestimates me," I said quietly. There was a pause. Outside, thunder rolled. Mason's phone buzzed again. He answered instantly. "Yeah?"
Talk to me.
I watched his expression shift, neutral, then startled, then deadly calm. He ended the call and turned to me. That was Agent Cole. He found Lauren. I straightened. Where? Downtown by the pier. She's meeting someone tonight at Pier 17. He thinks it's Hale. I didn't hesitate. Then that's where we're going. Sam, Mason said firmly, we can't just show up there. You're still a target. You step outside and it's open season. I met his eyes. They already tried to kill me once. I'm done hiding. He hesitated, then sighed.
Fine.
But we do it smart. You wear a vest, stay in the car until I signal. No hero moves, got it? I smiled faintly. No promises. By midnight, we were parked near the docks. The wind howled through the metal cranes, carrying the smell of salt and oil. The rain had softened to a mist, but the night was darker than ink. Through binoculars, I saw her. Lauren, standing near the edge of the pier, a black umbrella over her head. She wasn't alone. A man approached her, tall, confident, wearing a long coat. Even from this distance, I recognized that posture, that arrogance. Senator Hale. He reached into his coat pocket and handed her something small. Looked like a flash drive. Lauren slipped it into her purse and handed him another envelope in exchange. Mason whispered beside me, she's transferring the data. That drive probably contains everything we had on Project Haven. Then we can't let them leave, I said. Before Mason could stop me, I opened the car door. Sam, he hissed. But I was already walking across the wet pavement, each step echoing through the empty dockyard. Hale noticed me first. Even from yards away, his smirk was unmistakable. Well, Representative Carter. Still breathing, I see. Lauren's eyes widened. Sam, what are you doing here? I should ask you that, I said. Stealing evidence for the man who ordered my arrest? Hale laughed softly.
Oh, Samantha.
You politicians never learn. Loyalty has a price. Lauren understands that. I turned to her. Is that true? Lauren's face twisted with guilt. I didn't want to. You don't understand. He has my family. He said if I didn't help him, they'd... Enough, Hale snapped. You've said too much. He grabbed her arm roughly, yanking her toward him. I stepped forward. Let her go. Or what? Hale asked, grinning. You'll arrest me? You have no power left, Carter. The state thinks you're unstable. Your reputation is gone. Mason appeared from behind a shipping container, his gun raised. Put your hands up, Hale. The senator didn't flinch. You really think this ends with a gun? You have no idea how deep this goes. And then another sound. The screech of tires. 2 black SUVs roared into the dockyard, headlights blinding us. Doors slammed open, and men in tactical gear poured out, weapons drawn. Federal agents. Mason shouted, raising his badge. The men didn't stop. They're not ours. Mason yelled. I ducked behind a crate as bullets tore through the air. Hale dragged Lauren toward the SUVs. She fought him, screaming, but one of the men hit her in the stomach with a rifle butt, forcing her down. Mason, I shouted. He fired back, hitting one of the attackers in the leg. Get to cover.
Now.
I crawled toward a pile of barrels, heart pounding. Hale was almost at the car now, shouting orders. Lauren was struggling, tears streaming down her face. One of the men grabbed her, but in that split second, I saw something. She slipped the flash drive out of her pocket and flung it across the dock. It skittered under a shipping container. Hale didn't notice. Neither did his men. Go, he barked. The SUVs screeched away into the darkness, leaving shell casings and chaos behind. When the gunfire stopped, the only sounds were the echo of waves and the moan of the wind. Mason stumbled over, clutching his arm where a bullet had grazed him. You okay? I nodded, still shaking. Lauren. She's gone, he said grimly. They took her. I swallowed hard. But she threw the drive. We searched the dockyard for 10 minutes before I found it. Wet, dented, but intact. When I held it up, Mason's eyes widened. If that's what I think it is. It's everything, I said. Project Haven. The payments. The orders. All of it. He nodded slowly. Then this is the final move. Back at the safe house, Mason plugged the drive into a secure laptop. Files began flooding the screen. Emails, memos, even signed authorizations. And at the top, one file glowed in bold. Haven_master_log, MP4. Mason clicked it open. The video was grainy, recorded from a surveillance feed. It showed Hale in a meeting room with several men, businessmen, officers, politicians. Their faces were all recognizable. They discussed money.
Votes.
Silence. Then, the words that froze my blood. Make sure the representative is discredited before she exposes us. If she resists, stage the arrest. Accuse her of misconduct. We'll deal with her quietly after. There it was. Every detail. Every plan. Proof of the conspiracy. Mason exhaled. This will bring down the entire administration. I leaned forward, staring at the screen. Then let's make sure everyone sees it. But before Mason could copy the file, the laptop flickered. Then black. What happened? I gasped. Mason hit the keys. The system's locked. Someone's remotely accessing it. A message appeared in red text across the screen. You should have stayed dead. My stomach dropped. Hale knows, Mason whispered. The lights in the safe house went out. Outside, engines roared to life. And in that single heartbeat of silence, I realized they had found us. The power cut plunged everything into darkness. The only light came from the rain-soaked windows, flashing whenever lightning tore across the sky. Mason, I whispered, but before I could finish, the front door exploded inward with a deafening boom. Get down, he shouted. I dropped to the floor as splinters and glass flew through the air. Figures in tactical gear poured into the house. Black masks, heavy boots, silenced rifles glinting in the strobe of lightning. Mason fired twice before rolling behind the overturned couch. They found us faster than I thought, he muttered.
How?
I gasped. We were off-grid. They've got eyes everywhere. A bullet tore through the wooden table near my head. I ducked lower, crawling toward the back room. We can't stay here. Mason nodded. Basement exit, go. I sprinted through the hallway, bullets cracking behind me. The air was filled with smoke and the sharp smell of gunpowder. My lungs burned. My heartbeat drowned out everything else. Behind me, Mason fired again. Then I heard him grunt in pain. Mason. I turned. He was clutching his shoulder, blood seeping through his sleeve. Go, Sam. I'll hold them off. I'm not leaving you. Now, he barked, his tone leaving no room for argument. Tears stung my eyes, but I forced myself toward the basement door. I yanked it open, stumbled down the narrow stairs, and slammed it behind me. The basement was pitch black, save for a faint green glow from an emergency exit sign. I could hear footsteps upstairs, shouts, gunfire. Every sound echoed like thunder. Then I spotted it. The old storage freezer Mason had converted into a hidden escape tunnel. He'd shown it to me once, half joking that it was our last-ditch rabbit hole. I pushed the heavy lid open and climbed in, closing it just as footsteps thundered down the stairs above me. Through the tiny gap, I saw black boots enter the basement. Flashlights swept across the room. Clear? One voice asked. Not yet, another replied. Search everything. My breath caught. The freezer was airtight for short periods, but the space was suffocating. I clutched the small USB drive in my pocket, the one Lauren had thrown me at the pier, and prayed they wouldn't find me. One of the flashlights paused, its beam hovering just inches from the freezer. Please don't open it. Please don't open it. Then, another voice, louder. We got the target upstairs. Move. My heart stopped. Mason. They'd taken him. The boots retreated up the stairs, and the door slammed shut. I waited for what felt like an eternity before pushing the lid open. The basement was empty, save for shattered furniture and bullet holes in the wall. I stumbled up the stairs and froze. The living room was wrecked, glass shattered, paper scattered, and blood on the floor. Mason's badge lay beside a broken lamp. They had him. An hour later, I was driving aimlessly through the city in a stolen sedan, hands trembling on the steering wheel. The rain had turned into a downpour. My phone was dead, my head pounding. "Mason, please hold on," I whispered to myself. I pulled into a deserted parking garage and turned off the engine. For a moment, I just sat there, breathing, trying to think. Then I remembered the drive. The backup copy of the files from the dockyard. If I could get that to the right people, federal level, maybe even the press, it could still expose everything. But I couldn't do it alone anymore. There was only one person left I could trust, Detective Alvarez, an old friend who had helped me years ago when I was still in community law. Honest, quiet, and one of the few who hadn't sold out to politics. I found a payphone nearby and dialed his number from memory. He answered on the second ring. "Alvarez." "It's Sam," I said. "I need help."
A pause. Then Sam?
"Where the hell have you been?" "The news says you disappeared." "The cops. They're working for Hale." I cut in. "Listen to me. Mason's been taken. I have proof of the entire operation. But they're coming for me too." "Where are you?"
"Downtown."
"Parking garage on 11th and Main. Level 4. Stay there. I'll come to you." I hung up, my pulse racing. For the first time in days, I felt a flicker of hope. But 20 minutes later, when I saw headlights approaching in the mirror, that hope began to fade. The car that pulled up wasn't Alvarez's old sedan. It was a black SUV. My stomach twisted. The driver's door opened, and Lauren stepped out. Her clothes were soaked, her hair plastered to her face, but her eyes, they were hollow. I froze. "Lauren." She raised her hands slowly. "I'm not here to hurt you, Sam. Please, just listen." I got out of the car, keeping distance between us. "Why should I? You betrayed me." Tears mixed with rain on her cheeks. "He has Mason. Hale has him locked up at an old shipping warehouse outside town. I came to warn you." I shook my head. "Why would I believe that? You handed him everything." "I didn't mean to," she cried. "He said he'd release my sister if I cooperated. But when I gave him the drive, he killed the men who helped me. He's going to kill Mason too." "Where?" I demanded. "Pier 19. The warehouse with the red doors." "But you can't go alone, Sam. He's got half the security force guarding it." My heart pounded. "Then come with me." She hesitated. "If I go back, I'm dead. You already risked coming here. Don't stop now." Lauren looked at me for a long moment, then nodded. "Okay, but we have to move fast. He's planning something bigger than you think." "What do you mean?" "Hale's going live on national television tomorrow morning," she said, voice shaking. "He's going to announce Project Haven as a new public safety initiative. He'll make it sound patriotic. He'll turn your arrest into proof that he's cleaning out corruption." I felt sick. "So, he's turning his crime into a victory speech."
"Exactly," she said.
"And Mason, he's the only one left who can testify against him. If Hale kills him tonight, everything dies with him." Lightning split the sky behind her, illuminating the tears in her eyes. I clenched my fists. "Then we stop him. Tonight." Lauren took a shaky breath. "Sam, if we do this, there's no turning back." "There never was," I said quietly. An hour later, we stood outside the warehouse on Pier 19. Rain hammered the corrugated metal roof. From a distance, we could see guards pacing the perimeter, rifles slung across their shoulders. Lauren pointed toward the far side. "There's a service entrance, less guarded. It leads straight to the lower floor. Mason's likely being held there." I nodded, tightening my grip on the flashlight and pistol Mason had given me days ago. "You take the security cameras. I'll find him." She hesitated. "Sam, if we don't make it." "We will," I said firmly. "Now go." She disappeared into the shadows while I crept toward the building. The door was unlocked. Too easy. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of metal and gasoline. Dim lights flickered overhead. I moved quietly down the corridor until I heard it, muffled voices. "Finish him tonight," one of them said. "Senator's orders." I followed the sound to a room with a reinforced door. Through a small window, I saw Mason, tied to a chair, blood on his temple. I reached for the handle.
Locked.
Then a sound behind me. A cold, familiar voice. Going somewhere, Representative? I turned slowly. Senator Hale stood there, calm, his suit immaculate despite the rain. He smiled. You really don't know when to quit, do you? I raised the pistol, my hand steady despite the fear. It's over, Hale. He chuckled softly. On the contrary, my dear. It's just beginning. He snapped his fingers. And suddenly, lights flooded the room, dozens of armed guards surrounding me, rifles aimed. Lauren stepped out from the shadows behind him. My chest went cold. Lauren? I whispered. She couldn't meet my eyes. Hale smirked. You didn't really think she came here on her own, did you? The floor seemed to drop beneath me. I'd been played, again. The room spun as they tore the pistol from my hand and shoved me to my knees. The concrete floor was wet, cold, and smelled faintly of oil and blood. Hale walked toward me slowly, his polished shoes echoing across the metal walls. Representative Samira Collins, he said in a tone dripping with false admiration. The people's voice. The righteous reformer. And now, he crouched in front of me, smiling like a wolf. The fugitive. I glared at him, forcing myself not to show fear. You won't get away with this. Oh, I already have. He stood and nodded to one of the guards. Take her inside. Let her see what happens to heroes. They dragged me into a smaller chamber, a steel-walled room with flickering fluorescent lights. And there, in the center, chained to a chair, was Mason. His face was swollen, one eye nearly shut, his wrists raw from the cuffs. But when he saw me, a faint smile broke through his pain. Sam, you shouldn't have come. I was shoved into a chair opposite him. Hale followed, standing between us. Touching reunion, he said mockingly. You two really make this feel like a movie. Mason lifted his head weakly. You'll never bury what you've done, Hale. Someone will expose it. Hale chuckled. Who, exactly? Every journalist in this city has been bought or silenced. The files you gathered are being erased as we speak. By tomorrow morning, you'll both be nothing but headlines. Disgraced representative and rogue officer die in shootout. I clenched my fists, my nails digging into my palms. You're destroying people's lives for power. Hale's eyes narrowed. No, Representative. I'm preserving order. While you politicians argue over ethics, I act. The world doesn't need empathy. It needs control. Control? Mason rasped. You mean fear. Hale's smirk returned. Call it what you want. But by tomorrow, the entire state will support my plan. Project Haven will make me a national hero. And you too. Well, you'll be my proof that corruption must be purged. He turned to the guards. Record everything. Let's make it convincing. The men raised their cameras. My mind raced. I needed to think fast. The USB drive in my pocket, it was still there. Hale didn't know I had it. If I could somehow get it out, someone might still find it. But how? Then I saw Lauren standing behind the glass panel. Her face was pale, guilt written all over it. When our eyes met, she looked away. Hale turned to her. Lauren, you wanted redemption? Here's your chance. End this. He tossed her a gun. The room fell silent except for the steady hum of the lights. Lauren's hands trembled as she pointed the weapon, first at Mason, then at me. Do it, Hale ordered softly. Prove your loyalty. Tears streamed down her cheeks. I can't. Then you die with them. Hale reached for his own gun, but before he could pull it free, Lauren screamed and turned the weapon toward him.
Bang.
The shot echoed through the room. Hale stumbled backward, clutching his shoulder, blood spreading across his suit. Chaos erupted. Guards rushed forward, firing wildly. Mason dove to the floor, tackling one of them. I lunged toward the table, knocking over a light stand that sparked and sent a shower of sparks across the floor. Lauren, get the keys, I shouted. She grabbed them off the guard's belt and tossed them to me. I freed Mason, who grimaced but pushed himself to his feet. Go, he barked. We ran down the corridor as alarms blared and red warning lights flashed overhead. Guards shouted behind us, boots thundering on the metal floor. "This way," Lauren yelled, pointing toward a loading bay at the end of the hall. We burst through the double doors, only to find more armed men waiting. I froze. Then Mason stepped in front of us, raising the pistol he'd taken from one of the guards. "Run, Sam." I hesitated. "No."
Now.
He fired twice, dropping 2 of them. Lauren grabbed my arm and pulled me toward the emergency exit. We pushed through into the cold night air. Rain poured down in sheets, mixing with the glow of flashing lights from the docks. "Come on," she cried. We sprinted across the open yard, bullets sparking off metal containers beside us. I could barely hear over the rain and gunfire. My lungs burned. My heart pounded. Behind us, Mason was still firing, covering our escape. Then I heard it. A single, deafening gunshot. I turned back. Mason stumbled, clutching his chest, and fell to his knees. "No!" I screamed. Lauren yanked me forward. "We can't go back." "Mason." He looked up at me one last time, his lips forming silent words, "Finish it." Then he collapsed. The sound that came out of me wasn't a scream. It was something deeper, raw. But the guards were closing in, and Lauren was already dragging me toward the water. We reached the pier's edge, where a small maintenance boat rocked in the storm. Lauren climbed in and started the engine. "Get in, Sam."
Now.
I hesitated, staring back at the warehouse. Smoke was rising. Sirens wailed in the distance. Mason's body lay motionless on the wet concrete. "Sam, please," Lauren shouted. I climbed aboard, tears streaming down my face. The boat surged forward, cutting through the black water. The docks faded behind us. The city lights shimmered like ghosts in the rain. I clutched the USB drive in my pocket and whispered, "I'll finish it, Mason. I promise." Hours later, we drifted into the quiet part of the river, the rain easing into mist. Lauren sat at the front, shivering, staring blankly ahead. Neither of us spoke for a long time. Finally, I broke the silence. "You saved us back there." She gave a hollow laugh. "I also got him killed." "You gave us a chance," I said. "That's more than most ever would." She didn't respond. I looked at the skyline ahead, faintly glowing through the fog. Somewhere in that city, Hale's men were rewriting the truth. By morning, the news would call us criminals. But I still had the proof. And I had one last person who might believe me, Detective Alvarez. If I could reach him before dawn, there might still be hope. But then, from the far end of the river, a beam of light pierced the fog. A helicopter. Lauren saw it too. "They're still searching." "Then we hide," I said. But before I could steer toward the reeds, a voice boomed from above through a loudspeaker. "Representative Collins, stop the vessel and surrender." It was the police. The same department that had once worked under Hale. Lauren looked at me with panic. "They'll kill us." I gritted my teeth. "Not if we make them think we're dead first." I turned the boat sharply toward the old rail bridge ahead. "What are you doing?" "Trust me." The helicopter swooped lower, its spotlight blinding us. Bullets struck the water around the boat, sending sprays into the air. We reached the bridge, its middle section half collapsed into the river below. "Hold on," I shouted. And before Lauren could protest, I slammed the throttle forward, straight toward the broken edge. The boat lifted off the water for a split second, flying into the darkness. Then everything went black. Cold. That's the first thing I felt. A deep, bone-crushing cold that swallowed everything. My breath, my heartbeat, even my thoughts. Then came the pain. A sharp, burning ache in my arm and ribs as I kicked desperately toward the faint light above the black water. My lungs screamed for air. When I broke the surface, I gasped, coughing and choking as rain poured down like needles. "Lauren," I shouted. No answer. Panic shot through me. The wreckage of the boat was half submerged nearby, pieces of metal bobbing in the waves. I dove again, groping through the murky water, my hands numb. Then I felt her. I grabbed her arm and pulled with everything I had until we both broke the surface. She wasn't breathing. "Come on, Lauren," I cried, dragging her toward a piece of floating debris. I pushed her onto it and started chest compressions, shivering violently. "Come on, breathe." For a few horrible seconds, nothing happened. Then she coughed, sputtering up river water. Relief hit me like a wave. "You're okay. You're okay." Her eyes fluttered open weakly. "Sam, where are we?" "Still alive," I panted. "That's all that matters." In the distance, the helicopter's spotlight swept across the river, searching. "They're coming back," she said. "Not if we disappear first." I grabbed the broken oar and started paddling toward the dark tree line near the far bank. Every muscle in my body screamed, but I didn't stop until we reached the reeds. We slipped into the shadows just as the helicopter's beam passed over the water where we'd been moments before. "They'll think we drowned," I whispered. Lauren looked at me, teeth chattering. "And if they don't, then we make sure they regret not confirming it." We stumbled through the forest until dawn. The rain had stopped, but everything was soaked. The trees, the ground, our clothes. Every step squelched. At sunrise, we reached a small rural highway. My ribs throbbed with every breath, but I couldn't stop now. We were miles outside the city, and somewhere Hale was still alive. Lauren leaned against a tree, trembling. "We need help." "I know," I said. "And I think I know where to get it." I pulled the USB drive from my pocket. "This still has everything. If we can get to Alvarez, we can expose Hale before he goes on air." She nodded weakly. "How far?" "About 2 hours' drive." We flagged down an old pickup truck, the driver a middle-aged farmer with a kind face and a weathered hat. He looked at us suspiciously. "You two in some kind of trouble?" I hesitated. "We were in a boat crash. We just need a ride to the next town." He studied us for a moment, then sighed. "Hop in. But you better not be runaways or something." "Not exactly," I muttered. As we rode through the countryside, the radio crackled with a breaking news alert. State Representative Samira Collins presumed dead after violent river collision late last night. Law enforcement sources claim she was wanted for questioning in connection with multiple crimes including treason, data theft, and obstruction. The driver frowned. "That's you?" I froze. "No, it's a mistake." He turned down the volume, shaking his head. "World's gone crazy. You two look too tired to be criminals anyway." Lauren shot me a look, a mix of disbelief and relief. We reached the small town just before noon. I thanked the driver and told him to forget he ever saw us. He nodded and drove off, muttering something about staying out of politics. Lauren and I slipped into a rundown diner by the edge of town. The smell of coffee and bacon filled the air, normalcy we hadn't felt in days. We sat in a back booth. I borrowed a waitress's phone and dialed Alvarez's number. It rang twice before he picked up. "Hello." "Alvarez, it's Sam." There was silence. Then, "Samira Collins? You're alive?" The news said. "I know what they said. Listen, I have the files. Everything about Project Haven. Mason's dead. Hale shot him." I could hear him take a sharp breath. "Where are you?" "In Greenfield. Old highway diner off Route 12. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Stay hidden." When Alvarez arrived, he looked older, tired eyes, stubble on his chin, but his face still carried that calm steadiness I remembered. He slid into the booth opposite me and leaned in. "You realize every cop in this state is looking for you right now. Then I'm glad you're not like the rest." He smiled faintly. "Never was." I handed him the drive. "This is everything. Hale's plan, the bribes, the evidence of the illegal arrests, Mason's reports. If you can get this to the feds or the media before he goes live." He pocketed it carefully. "I'll make sure it gets where it needs to." Lauren looked up. "You think they'll believe it?" "They won't have a choice," Alvarez said. "The proof will speak for itself." But even as he spoke, the door of the diner swung open, and 3 uniformed officers walked in. All conversation in the room stopped. Alvarez tensed. "Stay calm," he whispered. One of the cops approached the counter, showing a photo to the waitress. My photo. You seen this woman? He asked. The waitress frowned. Can't say I have. The cop turned toward our booth, eyes scanning the room. Lauren's hand gripped mine under the table. Alvarez stood up casually, intercepting them. Officers, he said smoothly, flashing his badge. Detective Alvarez, Bureau of Investigation. These two are witnesses under protective transport. Orders came from the top. The lead officer hesitated. We weren't told about that. Because it's above your pay grade, Alvarez said sharply. Now get back to your patrol before you compromise a federal case. The man hesitated another moment, then nodded and left, muttering under his breath. As the door closed, Alvarez exhaled. That won't hold them for long. We need to move. We drove north toward the capital in his unmarked car. My body was running on adrenaline and caffeine alone. Every mile brought the rising dread that Hale was still ahead of us, that his broadcast might already be underway. Then Alvarez's radio crackled again. Governor Hale expected to make a major announcement regarding national security measures within the hour. Lauren looked at me, pale. He's doing it. I clenched my jaw. Not if we beat him to it. Alvarez nodded. News stations in downtown Ottawa. I can get us in through the service entrance. Traffic thickened as we entered the city. Police cars were everywhere. Helicopters circled overhead. Billboards flashed with Hale's smiling face, the words Project Haven, a safer tomorrow. It made me sick. When we reached the station, Alvarez flashed his credentials and guided us through the back lot. We moved quickly through narrow corridors, avoiding security. Finally, we reached the live broadcast floor. Through the glass window, I could see Hale standing at the podium, cameras trained on him. He looked perfectly composed, his arm bandaged but hidden beneath his suit. And today, he was saying, we take our first step toward a stronger, safer nation. I pushed the door open and stepped into the studio. Gasps echoed around the room. Samira Collins? One reporter whispered. Hale's face drained of color. Arrest her, he shouted. But Alvarez moved faster. He handed the technician the USB drive. Play it.
Now.
The technician hesitated, then inserted it into the broadcast system. And suddenly, the screens behind Hale flickered. His own voice filled the room. Recordings of phone calls, surveillance videos, emails, proof of his crimes, flashed on live television for the entire nation to see. No, Hale roared, lunging for the control board. But Alvarez tackled him, pinning him to the floor. I turned to the cameras. My voice trembled, but stayed steady. My name is Representative Samira Collins. I was falsely accused and hunted by the same men who corrupted our justice system. The evidence you're seeing is real. Senator Hale ordered illegal arrests, silenced journalists, and even murdered those who tried to expose him. Tonight, that ends. The studio erupted in chaos, reporters shouting, producers yelling into headsets. Hale screamed as officers stormed in, dragging him away. Outside, I could hear sirens and helicopters, but this time, they weren't for me. Hours later, I stood outside the station, watching the sun rise through the rain. Lauren sat on the steps, wrapped in a blanket, staring at nothing. Alvarez joined me, hands in his pockets. The governor's finished. Federal agents are already moving in. You did it, Sam. I nodded slowly. We did. He looked at me quietly. You should rest. The storm's over. I smiled faintly.
No.
It's just beginning. But at least now, we're starting from the truth. The cameras across the city replayed the footage on every channel. People were cheering, crying, some even apologizing for believing the lies. Justice, real, raw, imperfect, had finally broken through. As I turned to leave, a thought struck me. Mason should have seen this. I looked up at the sky and whispered, "We finished it." Then, for the first time in weeks, I let myself cry, not out of fear or anger, but relief. Because sometimes, even when power corrupts and truth hides in the shadows, kindness, courage, and empathy still win, even if it costs everything.